glad you could join me today. Today we're going to make a little festive treat that we only make once a year at our house. It might not make any sense to anybody that doesn't understand the story, but this is our walnut squares that have no walnuts in them. And I'm famous for walnut squares that have no walnuts in them. We're going to make them with 2 cups of gluten-free graham cracker crumbs, and if you can't find them, you can use white cookies that we've made in the past ground up for a crumb. You need a nice crumb base, so we're using gluten-free graham crackers. We've got 1/4 cup of icing sugar, 1 egg, 1/4 cup of butter, 1 cup of chocolate chips. Over here for the topping on our no walnut squares, we have 2 cups of icing sugar, 1/4 cup of butter, and 2 tablespoons of milk. And we're going to start these squares. I'm going to mix them all together, and then I'll give you the story of why they're called no walnut squares. Okay, we're going to make the base first, and in order to do that, I'm going to take my butter, and I'm going to put it in this dish, and I'm going to take my chocolate chips, and I'm going to put it in there, and I'm going to take these to the microwave, and I'm going to microwave them until they're all melted and liquefied. It usually takes a minute in my microwave, 2 30-second blasts, so I'm going to go do that. Okay, now that I've got all these chocolate chips and butter melted, you can see what kind of a gluey mess this is. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a couple of spoonfuls of this mixture, not too much, for the top of these little squares. So the next thing I do is I make a little hole in the center of the gluten-free graham crackers, and I scrape that chocolate mixture right into the cracker mixture. Then I'm going to go get the fork I forgot, and I'm going to beat that egg a bit, and then I'm going to fold the egg in. Now we usually keep these in the freezer, so I don't worry about the raw egg. If you are concerned about a raw egg, don't put it in there. You can leave this step out. They won't be quite as pleasant a texture, but they'll still be perfectly acceptable. So I'm going to put the icing sugar in there for the sweetener. I'm going to take this over and get my fork, and I'll be right back. So you take the egg and you beat it a little bit with the fork to break the yolk up, and you dump that all in the same mixture. And this is going to be our crust base. Now, I don't know how this happened, but my son was just a tiny little fella, and for some reason I must not have crushed the graham crackers. Back in those days we used real graham crackers, and I must have not crushed them quite enough, and they were kind of textured, so he assumed that there were walnuts in the squares. And every year he would ask for his walnut squares, and we used to laugh about it to ourselves because he was small and didn't understand that there were no walnuts in it. So for a long time I made it. Sometimes I put coconut in it, sometimes I put bigger pieces of graham cracker in there, and he always just naturally assumed that there were walnuts in there, and we never told him any differently until he was quite a bit older. So it's kind of stuck. It's one of those family traditions. I only make them once a year. I usually only make them for him, and we've enjoyed this little story amongst our family for many years. And I think that's part of what makes the holiday season in any household special. You develop little stories that only are pertinent to your own family, and this would be one of them. Okay, I'm going to take this base mix and I'm going to put it into my parchment covered casserole dish, or in this case 8x8 pan, I guess it is. Just lumps right out nicely. I'm going to use that fork. And like I said, I keep these in the freezer and give them to him frozen, and he usually eats them either refrigerated or frozen anyway, so. And then you just spread this around. Now it's going to make a lot of noise, so I'm going to try not to talk too much through this. I'm just going to use my hands. Always wash your hands. Spread this base around. Try to get it even. That's the better part of parchment. It doesn't really stick to anything, including your baked goods. Now, speaking of baked goods, this does not have to be baked. That's all there is to this crust, and I'm going to show you what it looks like. quite shiny. And now I'm going to set this off to one side, and I'm going to make the filling, which is the icing mixture. So move this over here. I'm going to take my butter and my milk. I'm going to set those crumbs over there, and I'm going to go get a clean spoon and a fork to spread this with after. Alright, so I've got 2 cups of icing sugar here. If you like, you can put food coloring in this. I don't bother. You can also put cherries in it if you want to make it a little different, chopped cherries. You can put nuts in it if you want, whatever you like. We just keep it simple because this is the favorite of the household. There we go. And I always try to make little treats at Christmas time for each member of the family, something that they like best for themselves. But the walnut squares are the greatest joke of all. Alright, I'm going to put my milk in there. I have 2 tablespoons of milk. You might need a little more, a little less. If I added too much milk, I'll just put a tiny little bit more icing sugar. Most of these recipes are fairly accurate, but if your butter's a little softer than normal, it could become quite a bit looser than you would normally have. Sometimes if the butter's a little harder, you need just a hair more milk because it won't mix up properly. You just keep stirring this around until it's nice and smooth and well blended. Okay, so now I've got the icing, or the center. As you can see, it's a nice creamy mixture. It looks really good and it tastes even better. So you just plop that right onto your base. And like I said, it does need to be kept in the refrigerator because of the raw egg. But again, as I've said, my fingers are clean by the way. As I've said before, you don't have to put the egg in, but it will change the texture of the base a little bit. That's perfectly acceptable for most people. And then you just spread this around the bottom of the base so that there's this nice gooey frosting layer over the base that has no walnuts in it. The no walnut squares. If you go to a party and take this recipe, you can, tell everybody that you discovered this lovely YouTube recipe of a walnut square that has absolutely no walnuts in it. They won't have a clue what you're talking about. But it makes for a good story. Alright, I'm just going to scrape this off with my finger. Fill in that little spot over there, and I'm going to take this little bit of drizzle that we have left, and I'm just going to spread that around the top of the squares just to make them look a little fancy. As I said before lots of times, I'm not a fancy baker, I'm a tasty baker. I don't care if it looks exceptionally pretty. I do like it to look nice, but if it doesn't look, professional chef baker quality, I could care less as long as it tastes fine. Now there are some people that are quite fancy bakers, and they're quite welcome to do that. It's just not my thing. But it doesn't make it wrong, it just doesn't make it right for me. There we are. I'll just work that fork back and forth to make little designs. Not that they're anything too fancy. I'm going to put these in the refrigerator, and then after they're, set fairly well, I'm going to cut them, and then I'm going to put them, wrap plastic over the top of them and keep them in, store them in the deep freeze until it's time to eat them. And there's our little squares. I hope you give this recipe a try, and I hope you enjoy it. And I enjoyed making it for you and tell you one of my little Christmas stories.